Thank you guys, as always, for listening to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. This week, we are bringing you something extra special. We've got some bonus content from our interview with Dr. Ryan Sultan. If you missed it, he's a professor of psychiatry at Columbia University, and his insight on mental health was so groundbreaking. I would love for you to have a listen to this bonus content. It's got a little something special for you if you are a neurospicy individual or if you know anyone who is. So enjoy this bonus content. And as always, let us know if you'd like to see more. Can you kind of describe what you would put forth as some of the most important tactics when it comes to parenting ADHD children, and how it's different than parenting a neurotypical child?
Yeah. ADHD children are like you, they need slightly different love and maybe a little bit of extra love. And you have to sort of frame it that way because uh, anyone who has raised an individual with ADHD will tell you it can be very challenging at times. And it can be challenging at times because that individual, no matter how hard they may try, right? And that's the thing we got to remember with ADHD. It's not that they're not trying hard enough. That's not a good way to conceptualize what's going on here. That there may be areas that they're behind on and they need to get caught up on, and we need to help them get caught up. That should be a goal. But we also have to be realistic about how quickly they're going to get caught up in different areas. And so, if for individuals with ADHD, uh, let's get it evaluated and a diagnosis. I tell parents this medication is really effective and it doesn't seem to have any downsides. It seems to only have positive effects that we've been able to notice in terms of like reduction of car accidents, better academic performance, less likely to drop out of school, less likely to lose their job, less likely to get pregnant as a teenager. There's a number of different things that have been found to be early treatment is important. Depending on the age group, you can think about what that is. So hopefully everyone can get access to a good child psychiatrist that can help you work through that. Younger kids, I mean, one of the things that I think is really important, really strong, consistent parenting skills. So there are a number of books that you can put together, look at for it. But how can I structure my parenting? And this may mean that for your 12-year-old, you are structuring the parenting like you might with an 8-year-old. Okay. And it may feel infantilizing, but you have to meet them where they are right now and help them move along that. And they will move along that, but it's just going to be a little more effort maybe than we were hoping for. And we take a deep breath and we continue to help them with that. And for as they get older, one of the things I love is any kind of executive functioning, organizational ADHD coach. There are a lot of people that do this. Fortunately, it doesn't have like a clear certification system at the moment. But these are individuals. There's a mixed batch. Some of them are social workers. Some of them are former teachers. Some of them are just like amazing moms that had like 3 boys with ADHD and are like, I'm apparently really good at this. That's really helpful because, when you have ADHD, and for the parents at home that have individuals that are maybe a little bit older, it's like you'll know that, hey, if I sit down with them and I make a list of everything we need to do and I make the list, that helps them. If I take the list and then I break the list down into small pieces, and it doesn't just say clean your room. It's like, well, what do we have to do to clean our room? How would we actually do it? Like, how do we break it down into little pieces? How do we organize it? How do we set a deadline of when that's going to get done? How do we get into a routine? These are skills that you want them to learn because they will help them succeed the rest of their life.
The thing that I am constantly coming up against, as a mom myself, is that some of these skills you sort of expect someone to pick up sort of miraculously, and neurotypical kids often do, or maybe you did in your neurotypical. So you kind of are like, well, yeah, of course you make a list for task initiation. Of course you don't get overwhelmed. You just start with the first thing. Like these are And I think for me, dropping all of the assumptions that would be just known or picked up on like osmosis, and instead saying that that's a skill that you have to talk about, that you have to develop, that you have to practice. I think that has been a real game changer. Just if you don't say it, assuming that it's been learned is
And you
absurd.
may have to say it many times.
We may have to have charts all over the house
You
saying,
you may need to have charts all over the house. You may need to color coordinate things. This is where people that are neurodivergent, we have to be creative, and cool stuff comes out of it. Okay, like I have a learning disorder. I have ADHD. God bless my mother for raising me and my brother, but she did okay. We're both doctors, so she must have done something right all the way. But when I was in residency, we used to have these handwritten forms, and this was like not that long ago. It was a little bit weird that we were like handwriting these forms, and my handwriting is terrible, and I can't organize my thoughts. So I made these PDF documents where we have like a little box. Basically, took the form and you can now type into the little box, and then you just print it out. And they still had the physical chart because the nurses wanted the physical chart, but I got to type it up. And you know what ended up happening? Everyone was using them within a month, and that was just the new system. And it was designed for me because I was like, I can't do this. Someone help me. But it ended up being a standardized system that was used. I mean, the whole time I was in residency, so it's at least 4 years.
so many of these executive functioning skills, as I'm learning with my son, and he has an executive functioning coach, as I'm learning them, I'm like, yeah, but these are good for every brain. I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this. That's a great idea. I'm going to do that. I'm a grown person who's neurotypical. These are not things that shouldn't be taught literally to every single human being.
Yeah, that's the
But
great part of them is that they tend to be like just better ways of putting it together.
you did a better way at the hospital. They were doing it inefficiently, and your brain was like, this is inefficient and stupid, and I don't function this way. So you did a better mousetrap, and then everyone was like, yeah, yeah. Mm.
It was funny because like there was a period of time where they were like annoyed. The administration was annoyed that they had to do this, and that like disappeared once everyone was doing it and everyone was talking about it. Like everyone forgot that this was this annoying request that I had made.
I love
So how do you change stuff for people? Like, right, how do you sort of adjust it and translate it? Is really what that comes down to. And how do you meet them where they are? And as tiring as this is, parents, the younger they are, the more important it is, right? Because the more the sort of fresher their sponges at
yeah.
absorbing things. And we have these windows of time where you're supposed to learn certain skills. We used to think that they just close. Now we realize they just sort of, it's like a door that's sort of infinitely getting tighter and tighter. So it gets harder and harder to learn certain things. That's why, like, my niece, who's not even two, somehow manages to be speaking Arabic, English, and Spanish. I don't know. It's very impressive. She's able to learn that, and she's sucking that up like into her mind like crazy. Whereas, like, that would be hopeless for me to be able to do that right now. I mean, it would be the only thing that I would be working on, and I would not be able to make the progress that she does. In fact, the problem is my brother's Spanish is not very good, and his daughter's Spanish has gotten better because they had a nanny that spoke Spanish. So my brother's like, "Oh my god, I have to learn more Spanish. She's saying things to me. It's more advanced than me."
Oh, that is incredible. And it just goes to show the capability of a child's mind, and just remembering that spongy period where it's like everything is everything in that period, and like we can either maximize or we can just like put them in front of Miss Rachel. um I I have to ask you this because I recently just saw this study, and you talked a little bit about medication. So many parents are in this like, I don't know, do I not? And you also talked about early intervention. This study that came out showed early intervention with medication with children as young as 6, and then followed them up and saw that the literal shapes of their brain and the way their brain developed was different than the non-medicated kids. Um, this gave me a whole bunch of pause. And there was a whole bunch of people in the comments saying, I wish my parents had medicated me when I was young. It would have been so much easier for me. But then you have other people who are sort of feel as if this is not a disability. This is who I am. I don't want to be someone different. There's nothing wrong with me. Um, can you talk about bridging that gap a
This
little
is
bit?
like a this is going to boil over. I promise you. At some point, we
Okay.
have not reached this point, but you're hitting on a thing that I think is a really going to be a very hot topic, which is people that are, especially the autism community, and
Yep.
ADHD does this a little bit. There's been a movement towards to stop thinking of these things as disorders, to stop thinking them as disabilities, and to think of them as just differences that people have. And there's even some evidence, particularly with ADHD, that says maybe ADHD has been around forever and it wasn't actually a disorder historically, that it was maybe even an adaptation, right? Like that fact that you want all that novelty with ADHD. When you're gathering for things, you probably gather faster and try all these different techniques and you explore, and like that's an actually advantageous evolutionarily to us, which would suggest that like it only became a disease when we all started having to like sit in a room for 8 hours a day quietly. And so
Coloring.
it's huh? Yeah, yeah.
Coloring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an interesting, right, because there'll always be some edge cases that are like, "Ooh, I cannot do this, I cannot do this," and those are probably some of the people, or a good portion of the people that are getting diagnosed with ADHD. So I think it's a fair conversation to be having. There's a flip side of it, which is also that when you don't treat people, we know that in the society that we live in, which I'm not a international global dictator that can change these things. um, the rates of depression and anxiety from untreated ADHD and substance use are crazy. I mean, I have like a paper on it. Like the comorbidity, meaning the other conditions you have as an adolescence from untreated ADHD, is very, 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 very high. It's like, in fact, it's the norm, actually, right? It's most of them are going to have that, and that upsets me. So when parents are like, "I don't know that I want to treat it," well, the consequences of that are self esteem issues because they're going to keep trying and they're not going to understand why they're having trouble. The consequences of that are they're going to make a lot of careless mistakes, and they are now anxiously worried about making mistakes all the time. The consequences of that can be that they keep trying and they can't succeed, and they actually end up depressed because they don't understand what's going on. And that's a there's a known negative, and I try to remind people of that when we're not thinking about treatment. At the same time, I completely agree. It's a fair argument to say, like, is it reasonable to sort of push this on people? I don't know, and we probably could do more in our society to accommodate people, because like my story was that you can accommodate people with differences in a way that actually everyone seems to like,
Right.
and is generally beneficial for everyone. But in the meantime, on an individual level with your kid,
Yeah.
what I want is your kid to not have a high risk of depression, anxiety, substance use, and to not experience it as like a trauma, right? Like that they struggled so hard, which again is going to have a negative impact for them in the long run.
There's, there's a certain amount of struggle, I think, that is,
Mm-hmm.
um, the
It's
golden,
okay.
yeah,
In fact, is even beneficial.
right. Because we talked about, the snow plowing,
Yeah, yeah, the
how,
resilience.
right, and how much resilience. And I think sometimes parents struggle with like, well, I don't want to snowplow this. I want them to, figure out how to work with the brain that they have and how to maximize it. And if there's struggles along the way, it's going to make them who they are. It's going to make them resilient. But the research stands. And when I saw that car accident one, that really blew me away. I mean, it's not surprising, but like,
You can delay medication treatment. That's not that that's the wrong answer. There are individuals that have milder versions that are otherwise very functional and or have lots of services. Like if you have a parent or tutors that can sit with you every night, doing your work with you, making sure that it gets done, and they have the time and the patience to do that, and you don't end up screaming at each other, great. Like you can try to sort of delay that, and there is going to be some character development, um, but you have to be open to the idea that there is a known risk that that's not that it ends we end up doing too much of that, right? And it becomes it becomes torture for them, not character building.
You're so right. You're so right that there's definitely a line where it's just like unfair that everything is so much harder for me than it is for everyone else. And why and when is that going to stop? And how come I have to work so much harder?
Yeah, and that's a very common thing that they say. uh,
It's it's a really hard decision, but I think that you are out there doing the work to give parents the tools that they need to make the right.
and when you consider medication, please, parents, you have to be okay with it, and you have to really be okay with it, because if you're not okay with it, remember that modeling thing, your kid's going to know, and it's going to affect what ends up happening. So if you're like, you need to work on being ready for it too, because they're going to decide whether they like it or not, mostly based on how you feel about it.
That's so true.
and and,
That
and, and I'm talking about nonverbal signals. I'm not literally saying I'm okay with medication. I'm like, what's your tone? How do you describe it? What words do you use? Do you describe them as drugs? Because if you use the word drug, that has a negative connotation. I was in a conference in Europe 2 years ago, and I was talking about pharmacology, and they made it clear, please never use the word drugs, because that everyone thinks that means drug us, which only means
yeah,
like illicit drugs. So and in English, it definitely still has that connotation, right? Whereas medicine does not have that connotation. You have to be framing it in that way. And if you can't, and you're not ready to do that, I don't push parents to start treatment, because I think that it ends up more than likely kind of blowing up in everyone's face,
absolutely.
because they don't feel good about it. And the kid says they have a headache, then everyone gets stressed about the headache, and it becomes catastrophic. And then we stop the med, and it was a negative experience. And you know, a lot of psychiatry is people having positive experiences, even if they don't get all the treatment they need that time that they interact with us. But I want them to leave. They can leave. They can, but like, we want them to leave and like say, oh, that wasn't so bad. Like, next time I need some kind of help, even if they still need help, in our opinion, next time I need that help, which will eventually happen, I'm going to go back to one of those people. I'm going to go back to someone in that field. I trust that that field has something to offer.
What a good that was really, really succinct and very, I think that's a really great way to put it. And what sort of invest in the thing is really so much determinant of what the outcome is going to be in the end. So that is, yeah, that is so, so poignant. um is there any sort of parting thoughts that you want to give on any of the parenting struggles that come with neurotypical kids, neurodivergent kids, in a digital age?
Parenting is, I think, maybe one of the hardest things that any of us ever have to do. And you need to validate that for yourself. You need to validate that you are going to screw up, but thank goodness you just need to be, and this is an old Winnicott term. It was a guy that was like an old psychoanalyst, and he would say, we need to be good enough parents. And he wants you to be a good enough parent, because if you just try to be a good enough parent, you're not perfect all the time, right? You're not snowplowing everything. They have enough of challenges that they need to figure out on their own, that you're actually helping them developmentally. And so that will naturally occur with many of the errors that everyone will make as a parent. Even experienced parents will still make, because each kid that you have, the method you used for one is not always going to be ideal for the other. So forgive yourself. Forgive yourself.
Just, you know what, in general, if you have a kid, if you don't have a kid, if you're an awesome parent, if you feel like you're the worst parent, like just all of it is just forgive yourself and come with your
And
best
take
self.
care of yourself, right? Like, like I'm looking into starting a family soon, and one of the things I think about a lot is I'm become very into fitness and weightlifting, and I'm learning soccer, and I'm like, I have to include maybe not all of this, but like I have to include some of this in my life as part of my maintenance. How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
How am I going to find some of that time? And because if you don't force yourself to do it, it just doesn't happen.
And there's a nice layer of guilt that goes along with doing anything for yourself too. That's a really fun thing that you it's listen, forgiving yourself and showing yourself some grace is always going to be a great piece of advice and get you
Yeah,
a really
we're all screwing up all the time. It's just sort of what you do after you screw up with that information, right? How can I do a better job?
let's hear it for that. Dr. Ryan, thank you so much.
My
This was
pleasure. My pleasure. So nice to meet you. So nice to talk.
beautiful. Yes.